In an exceptionally rare occasion, a school is moving to a lower-ranked conference as Western Illinois is leaving the SEC of FCS football, the Missouri Valley Football Conference, and the Summit League for the Ohio Valley Conference. To get into why, we have to look at the unique challenges Western Illinois is facing. Western Illinois is located in the region called Fergatonia, and Fergatonia is a 16-county region that fictionally seceded politically in the early 1970s in response to infrastructure and transportation underfunding. The fictional Republic of Fergatonia was conceived by residents of McDonough County, where Macomb is located, with a Western Illinois student named Governor. Now, if we take those 16 counties in this fictional Fergatonia region and look at population trends, population in those 16 counties declined by 7.5% from 2010 to 2020 and by over 10% from 2000 to 2020. Now, if we narrow Fergatonia to a 50-mile radius of Macomb, that population within a 50-mile radius of Macomb declined by 8.9% over 10 years. Adding to the problems is that Macomb is located relatively in Nowhereville in relation to the interstates, as it's at least 45 minutes from the closest interstate. Then you have the state of Illinois producing quite a few less college students than compared to 10 years ago, as the state of Illinois lost a quarter, 25% of its college enrollment from 2010 to 2020. Then the decline in state appropriations has really hurt WIU as well. According to the Illinois Board of Higher Education website, Western Illinois received $65.05 million in fiscal year 2002 and then $52.08 million in fiscal year 2022, which meant a 20% decline in state funding over the last 20 years. However, that doesn't account for inflation. So when you adjust for inflation, $65 million in 2002 becomes $105 million today, and the decline from $105 million to $52 million means that once you account for inflation, state funding for Western Illinois has declined by over 50% in the past 20 years. All of those factors predictably lead to enrollment decline, as Western Illinois has experienced a 43% enrollment decline over the past 15 years. And then you have the impending enrollment cliff nationwide starting in 2025, where college enrollment projections anticipate numbers to plummet by more than 15% after 2025. You take all these macro factors, and it has a chain reaction on WIU athletics. Lower enrollment and lower state funding leads to a lower budget, and a lower budget leads to a lower athletics budget. So Western Illinois would be better off moving to a better geographical fit so they can cut travel costs before they start cutting costs from their athletic budget. The other impact is that schools need to become creative for how they attract new students, and a primary vehicle for that is to have more presence in areas with alumni and student recruitment, as in theory, more connections with alumni leads to more alumni relationships, which leads to more donations towards the school, and more visibility in student recruitment areas increases the likelihood of new tuition-paying students. When you look at Western Illinois' alumni distribution, using the database from Wall Street Journal's Where Graduates Move After College, St. Louis is Western Illinois' #2 alumni hub with 3.2% of alumni. And to relate that to the OVC, SIU Edwardsville is within 25 miles of St. Louis, and Lindenwood is within 25 miles of St. Louis. Now, using WIU's published data, here are the number of WIU students on the Macomb campus from each state in the Summit League. There's 0 from North Dakota, 0 from South Dakota, 6 from Oklahoma, 6 from Colorado, 9 from Nebraska, 16 from Minnesota, and 74 from Missouri. In contrast, if we look at OVC states, there's 3 from Arkansas, 6 from Tennessee, 6 from Kentucky, 37 from Indiana, 74 from Missouri, and 107 from the Metro East. So that's not the state of Illinois, that's just the Metro East region, which is where SIU Edwardsville is located. Now, if you look at MSA rankings, there are 5 schools located in mid to big-sized cities: Denver, the Twin Cities, Kansas City, Tulsa, Omaha. And if you contrast that with the OVC, a handful of the schools are rural, just like Western, and there's only a few of those schools in large metropolitan areas. So Western Illinois, their location fits in a lot better with the locations in the OVC. Here are the enrollments in the Summit League. The only school with a lower enrollment than Western is Oral Roberts, who's a private school. Whereas if you look at the enrollments in the OVC, Western has a lot more enrollment parity with almost all the schools in the OVC, with the exception being SIU Edwardsville, is you have 10 of the schools between 6,800 and 9,900 enrollment. Looking at Summit League endowments, you have Denver dwarfing everyone and St. Thomas kind of dwarfing everyone too. The Dakotas have healthy endowments, same with Oral Roberts. Western Illinois has the lowest at 84 million, and they're only within half of 2 schools in the Summit League. Now compare that to the OVC endowments, and Western is half of every school's endowment in the OVC with the exception of Lindenwood. And Western's endowment is closer to the middle of the pack, and there's a lot more endowment parity in the OVC. Looking at athletic budgets, Western at 11.7 million is the lowest in the Summit League, and the only 2 schools they're within 5 million of are UMKC and Oral Roberts, but UMKC and Oral Roberts don't sponsor football. Compare that to the OVC, and Western's athletic budget competes a lot better. There's a lot of budget parity in the OVC with everyone between 7.5 million and 16 million. Here are the football budgets in the Missouri Valley Football Conference. Western Illinois' football budget is 100th and FCS at 3.10 million. There are only 3 schools in the MVFC outside the top 70. Compare that to the OVC Big South Alliance, where there's 8 schools with their football budget outside the top 70 in FCS. So Western Illinois' football budget competes a lot better in the OVC Big South Alliance. Now men's basketball budgets. Western's is 309th in Division I. Of course, St. Thomas's budget, that's going to rise considerably as they progress into their transition. So for the future, Western was going to have the lowest men's basketball budget in the Summit League. Compare that to the OVC, and Western ranks 4th in the OVC for men's basketball budget. And with the exception of Little Rock, everyone is ranked 299th or above in the OVC. Now looking at travel, how long a bus trip would take for Western Illinois to each school in the Summit League. Obviously, they'd be flying to Denver, but you get the point. There's only 2 Summit League schools within 6 hours, and then 3 of the schools are over 10 hours away. Compare that to OVC travel, where you have 5 schools within 6 hours. You have SIU Edwardsville at 2 hours 45 minutes, Lindenwood at 3 hours, Eastern at 3.5, SEMO at 4 hours 45 minutes, and USI at 5.5. And no one's going to be above a 9-hour bus ride. Now getting into competitive metrics, here are the 5-year Sagarin average rankings in the Missouri Valley Football Conference. Western at 181.4 would rank 11th in the MVFC. On the other hand, Western would be 3rd in the OVC Big South Alliance, where number 1 in the OVC/Big South would have been number 10 in the MVFC. Now 10-year KenPom in men's basketball, Western at 326 would be last in the Summit League, where Western is the only school ranked above 285th, compared to the OVC, where only Morehead State and Little Rock are better than 285th, and Western is a lot more competitive in the OVC. Now putting all that information together with comparisons between the 2 leagues on one slide, here are the number of students at WIU's Macomb campus from each state in the Summit League at the top, and then the OVC at the bottom. For the Summit League, you have Missouri at 74 and Minnesota at 16. But the thing about Missouri is the school from Missouri is UMKC, which is all the way on the far side of Missouri. And logically, many of the students Western is getting from Missouri are from that St. Louis area. Now compare that to the OVC. You have 37 from Indiana, 74 from Missouri, where you have Lindenwood in the St. Louis area, which is the area where presumably Western gets a lot of their Missouri students from. And then you have 107 students from the Metro East area, not the state of Illinois, the Metro East region. And the OVC has SIU Edwardsville located in that Metro East region. When it comes to reconnecting with alumni, St. Louis is Western's number 2 alumni hub, and the OVC has 2 schools that are within 25 miles of St. Louis and Sandwich, St. Louis. Regarding locations, Western's rural location fits in well with the rural locations of the OVC, with some bigger and mid-sized metropolitan areas sprinkled in. Now comparing enrollments with the Summit League at the top and the OVC at the bottom, with the exception of private school Oral Roberts, Western was lagging behind everyone when it came to enrollment. But if you look at the OVC, all the enrollments are very similar, with SIUE a level above everyone. Now looking at endowments, the top for the Summit League is scaled from 0 to 1 billion, where Denver towers over everyone and St. Thomas kind of does the same. The bottom graph shows the OVC, which is scaled from 0 to 250 million, and at the top is Lindenwood at 201 million, and then all the schools are pretty tightly packed together, and Western is closer to the middle of the pack. For athletic budgets, the Summit League graph at the top is scaled from 0 to 50 million, and you have Denver leading the way at above 40 million, and Western was at the bottom. They were only close to UMKC and Oral Roberts. That comes with the caveat that UMKC and ORU do not field football. Now compare that to the bottom graph with the OVC, which is scaled from 0 to 20 million. Leading the way, you have Tennessee State and Lindenwood at right above 15 million. And Western Illinois is closer to the middle of the pack of the OVC. And everyone's pretty tightly bunched together. Looking at the football budgets, at the top is the Missouri Valley Football Conference, and Western Illinois was at the bottom. Whereas in the OVC, Western Illinois was above a couple schools, and the schools were tightly packed enough together that they were pretty close to the median. With men's basketball budgets, the Summit League at the top, with the exception of St. Thomas, whose men's basketball budget is going to rise as they transition into D1. Western Illinois was going to have the bottom men's basketball budget in the Summit League in the future. While in the OVC, it's a much different story. Western has the number 4 men's basketball budget, and almost everyone is tightly packed together again. Here's comparing the bus trip time to each school in the Summit League and OVC. The Summit League only had 2 schools within 6 hours of Western, while the OVC had 5 schools within 6 hours, as SIUE 2:45, Lindenwood 3 hours, Eastern 3.5, SEMO 4:45, and USI 5.5. And then the longest bus trip in the OVC is 8.5 hours, whereas in the Summit League, you had the 2 North Dakota schools, 10.5 and 11.5. I'm not sure if Western flew there or not. And then Denver, 13.5. I'm sure Western flew to Denver. But cutting out those flights will save Western on travel costs. Now here are the 5-year Sagarin averages, with the top being the Missouri Valley Football Conference and the bottom being that OVC Big South Alliance. Western's 181.4 average was 11th in the MVFC. On the other hand, it was 3rd in the OVC Big South. Western has a strong football tradition. They won the Gateway in 88, 97, 98, 2000, 2002. They've been to the playoffs 11 times. They went to the quarterfinals in 97, semifinals in 98, quarterfinals in 02 and 03. But being underfunded in the MVFC has really cut their oxygen off in football. So moving to the OVC and Big South Alliance should resuscitate them. These are the 10-year Ken Poms in men's basketball. Western was last in 326 in D1, which was last in the Summit League. Whereas in the OVC, there's a lot more parity because there's only 2 schools that are better than 287th. Whereas you look at the Summit League, and the entire conference, with the exception of Western, is better than 287th. An added benefit of moving to the OVC is that the Eastern-Western rivalry will be reunited. The 2 schools have met 167 times in men's basketball, and they even had a sellout crowd of 6,736 in February of 1983 at Western Hall. Western and Eastern's history of sharing the same conference goes back all the way over 100 years ago in the Illinois Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, also nicknamed the Little 19. Membership was erratic and eventually dwindled down, and the conference would then later be renamed the Interstate Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, and Eastern and Western would still be together through the decades up until 1970, when the conference would collapse, and then the 2 would get back together in 1977 as 2 of 6 schools who would meet to form a Division II football conference named the Mid-Continent Athletic Association. A few schools left, and then Southwest Missouri State would join them, and the league would move up to D1 football in 1981. And these 4 schools, Southwest Missouri State, Northern Iowa, Western Illinois, and Eastern Illinois, would be 4 of the 8 co-founders of the AMQ8 Multi-Sport D1 Conference in 1982. So Western and Eastern would be together in the AMQ8, which would later become the Mid-Continent Conference. And then they would be split up for good when Eastern would leave for the OVC in 1996. And this move by Eastern was politically controversial, as Eastern, Western, Northeastern Illinois, and Chicago State were governed by the same Board of Governors in 96. The Northeastern Illinois president refuted all the points and numbers that EIU came up with in support of their moving conferences, and the Northeastern Illinois president was worried that the Mid-Continent would lose its auto bid, as the league was one defection from losing continuity, which was a rule back then. And Northeastern Illinois, Western, and Chicago State would lose $600,000 without that auto bid. The Chicago State president joined the Northeastern Illinois president in speaking out, fearing that EIU's exit would leave the other 3 Illinois schools homeless. However, that board of governors that governed Eastern, Western, Northeastern Illinois, and Chicago State was set to dissolve in January of '97, and then EIU would be under its own governing board. So the board did not get involved, saying that past EIU administrations had wanted the OVC for a long time. And 27 years later, the two rivals, Eastern and Western, will be reunited again.